Hello, Culture Matters podcast. I'm so excited to introduce you to our guest. Before I do that, here is a quote I picked just for this episode. He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster. Friedrich Nietzsche. We are back again with another episode of the Culture Matters podcast. We are talking about chapter 6 of Finding Honor with the one and only Christine Beckwith, founder of 2020 Vision for Success Coaching, mentor to many, author extraordinaire. And I mean that. Like, when I read these chapters, I'm just blown away by how articulate and captivating this book is. So thank you for coming back. Living in
Thank you.
ruins. Living in
Yes.
ruins. One day you wake up and look around and can hardly recognize your life. Have you had this experience? When I look back, I clearly see times where I ruined everything. First of all, my question to you is, why so honest?
Yeah, well, when you write a book with a tagline that says the journey to truth, you can hardly veer from that promise. I think this book was burning in me. I find that when an idea populates in my mind of great passion, even if I have a different timeline, this book's timeline in my mind was like, yeah, when I'm 80 years old and I'm really seeing the end of the road of my life, I'm going to do a tell-all, and it's going to tell about, all the things that were hard, because progressively, as I've been writing, this is, Finding Honor is my fifth book, my second solo book. I became someone that, reverted from doing business, books and, topical type of writings. And I moved into a more philosophical place where I started to share my story, because over the time I understood that what people wanted to hear from me and what the conversation would seemingly go to almost always when I was in a professional setting and with people. And so breaking the cycle, which was my fourth book, helped tell my rags to riches story. And it's a pretty profound story. And it's not just me, because I say in the book, it's not a special story. It's everyone has their story. But I think it really is a very vetted and validated story, because a very renowned, one of the highest ranked nurse practitioners in the American doctorate field happens to be a little girl that lived on this poor back road, very poor. And so, there's, everybody thinks they're poor until they have money. And so I hear a lot of these rags to riches stories, and I'm not poo-pooing anyone else's story, but when I say we were poor, like, we were really, really poor. And so I go from there to this book, and I don't think I'm writing this book. I think I'm just starting to write chapters in something that's going to be like a 40-year story that's told. And the words begin to just pour out of me. And it got more powerful as I went on and as I began to write. And I thought of the titles. I usually start a book and I write down 10, 12 different titles and even more taglines. And slowly but surely, as I write, the book has its own theme that comes out. It comes alive. The book comes alive. It's like naming a baby before it's born. When you have a book, my son's name is Jagger, and he's a seventh generation child of a lineage of men that have the initials JJB. So we had a little bit of help of narrowing the broad selection of what he would be named once we knew he was a boy, because we knew that it would, we want to honor the heritage and do a JJB name. And we went through all of the elimination to Jagger, but could he live up to the name Jagger? Would that fit him and his personality, and so on and so forth. And the thing about that is we grow into the name. So somewhere around chapter 2, 3, or 4, I knew that the book's name was going to be Finding Honor, because I was telling my life story, and I thought that best described what I was searching for in my life, in my personal development. Everybody wants to better themselves. And so, of course, to be honest, with a tagline that I ended up getting to, which was the journey to truth. finding honor meant getting honest with myself. And I think that encapsulates the whole book. And I can't skip the parts of my story, unfortunately, if you're going to go the whole gamut of my story. And unless you tell the really bad chapters of my life and the really dark parts of my story. And I now realize, and I didn't know this, and the book kind of taught me this about myself, is I've had a lot of tragedy. And more than a lot of people, and I don't know that I have more than the average, but I also think that I have personally struggled with darkness. I say in the book that, I have been challenged with, depression, clinical depression. And so here in Living in Ruins in chapter 6, I take the reader to a place. And I think it really reaches through the lens to whoever might pick this book up, because people buying this book want to go on a self-development journey. People that are reading this are intrigued by the idea that they need to improve from some place they're at right now, no matter what it is. I have a lot of professionals that pick it up very lightly, thinking they just want to see what I wrote. And then they are writing me like these heartfelt letters of like, you have me thinking so hard about myself. You have me looking so deeply inside my own psychology of how I'm wired. So Living in Ruins is the place we wake up on any given morning in the world, and we find ourselves in a place where we realize, looking around, we are really in trouble, maybe. For me, it's about the times I woke up and came to my conscious awareness that I was depressed and my life maybe was starting to fall apart or had fallen apart in its shape that it was in. And I had this happen a few times. So I'll stop there to tell you what the chapter is about, but I expand on this obviously in this chapter.
Well, I know this sounds unsavory. It's outside of the relationship zone. During those parts of my life, I was quite successful. I was leading companies, ranking amongst the top salespeople in my firms. I was growing my business and wealth. My life was financially on track to an extremely high regard. I was caring for my family and my friends, and I was leading a fun and exciting life. By outward measure, my life was charmed. And yet, if you were within my inner circle, there is no doubt you knew how broken I was. You knew my addictions and my vices. You knew my self-sabotage and ruin. Page 37.
Yep. Yeah.
Do you think that people are in that space and aren't even, they're not even tuned in that that's a constant in their experience and potentially is leading to those peaks and troughs, like ups and downs in their business? I'm curious what you.
I think people get up every day and try to put their best foot forward in life, no matter how bad their plight is. And I'm sure that there are many people this year in our industry that are facing depression through the market influx and loss of income. And, we all want to be intelligent people, and we as adults obviously want to manage our lives correctly. I mean, at 18 years old, I was defiant, running away from home. I was going to school, which one might say you weren't running away from anything, but I was running to something. But I was leaving the 18-year imprisonment of poverty with little in my pocket, but a high hope of change and a belief that I could change it. I felt chained by limiting beliefs in my lifetime. I had parents that had survived their own poverty, which by comparison to mine was so much worse, so much worse. And, I think they did good to put, 3 meals on the table. And I always say we had a rich environment, because we did. We went to church and we loved our neighbors and we loved each other, and we had a clean and safe home and a positive environment. But the house that I lived in for 18 years, my first 18 years, did not have room for some young girl with lofty ideas. And so I was that girl floating around at 7, 8 years old, like saying that I was going to be the president of the United States one day, things like that. And of course, because I was dreaming. And by the way, I really believe that when you are, I've now studied young children. I read a book. I had a book read to me by this wonderful woman who I don't know her name, when I was in rehab for my second stint. And I was immobilized in bed, sick, through my process. And she sat at the side of my bed. And the name of the book is Lil B. Lil B. And it is about an African refugee little girl that's like 12 years old, and she flees to England, and the story is about her journey. And there were so many things, even though I'm not an African girl fleeing from, apartheid or whatever, I was that little girl. And the relationship I could relate to in the story is that if you give a child trauma, that child's creative juices go through the roof. Because when you sit a poor child in a room with no toys and, starkness, and maybe even lack of secure things like proper bedding or food, that child will take a stick and a rock and make a castle in his mind, and himself the king. And that's where you go mentally. And so Living in Ruins to me is the chapter where I say I had to create my own door, if you will, because I believe the chapters that follow this chapter tell you how I saved myself from the place I found myself in. Living in Ruins is just a story about how deep my psychological depths are. I think if you're a high thinker, I think if you're a person that has a lot of philosophy, if you're a deep thinker, life can be 100 times heavier than those people just running around looking at shit on the surface. I personally can't watch the news. And the reason that I can't watch the news is that the story I see of demise will end up leaving me in a place where it's replaying in my brain for another month. Like and this happened to me young. I watched a scary movie. My mom and dad let me stay up on a Sunday night for a scary show on TV when I was 9 years old. And I ended up having reoccurring nightmares about this movie. And my mom and dad said, that's it. You're not going to get to watch anything like that. And so I spent the rest of my life not watching scary movies. When the Halloweens and the Friday the 13th and all the stuff of my era came out, I was not getting the movie ticket like my sisters were, because my parents kind of knew the way my brain worked. And I've never really talked about this before, but as an adult at 54 years old, I cannot watch violent or scary movies, and I still don't. And so if I am in on a Sunday and Corey picks a movie that has guns and murder and all of that, I'll either excuse myself from the room, or I will try to sit and watch. But when the parts come that are like that, I literally have this thing I do where I plug my ears with my thumbs and cover my eyes with my 2 index fingers. And so I completely block myself out from those scenes until I know it's over. And then and that sounds really silly, but I have discovered the way my brain works is that what I let into it can be the worm for me that really unravels everything. So again, Living in Ruins is my truthful sharing of a mind that I would say has been tortured, that I protect in many ways, because I feel things on such a heavy level that I've suffered a lot of depression in my life. And there's labels for this, by the way. There are doctors out there that want to label this and want to medicate it. And I have somehow, as I sit here in all my God honesty, I am a non-medicated human. I live holistically, but there's a lot of rules around that for me, which includes no vices, proper sleep, proper eating, proper physiology, you know, and I have to live and die by it. And even with living and dying by it, I suffer. Like I suffer a tortured life every single day. And so I hope that this chapter, because I have learned how to have a thriving, successful life, despite what I describe in this chapter, that people that are suffering with clinical depression, I'm going to help them walk themselves out of those places and also give them coping mechanisms that they can use the rest of their lives. I don't fall down the rabbit hole anymore. Thank God. And I'm never going to say never, because you never say never in the world that I live in. But I know that ultimately, I completely understand, like when I hear of suicide stories, I hate to say this out loud, but it's true, how people get there. Like other people that are like, I don't know what happened. Like it looks so crazy on the surface. And they're like, I don't know what that person was thinking. Like Robin Williams seems so happy. He was standing on a stage doing comedy every day. And I'm like, I completely know who that man is and how he's wired, you know, and he probably gave what he needed. I give what I need. I counsel people every single day because I need counseling. I consult people every single day because I need consulting. I hold people accountable every single day because I need accountability. You understand what I'm saying right now? I try to lift people up because I need lifting up.
What's some people that are, you know, they're listening to this and they're losing every game. What do you tell them?
I think that people have to prioritize their losses, and weight those losses by the gravity of the real nurturing of our lives. And what I mean by that is some people's lives are greased by money, and everything rises and falls by their income or their money. And I'm not saying we aren't all wired to like money or want money or need money. I think money, of course, drives the universe, and you can solve a lot of problems with money, of course. And look at me, like I was chasing that. I didn't have that. That's what I was deprived from. If you didn't get to eat candy for 18 years, well, then you go in search of the candy store. And for me, I didn't have money. And so there was a lot of sitting on the sidelines, you know, to things at school I couldn't do, and school trips I never went on, and, you know, all that shit. Clothes that I would have liked to have worn that I couldn't afford. And fads of things that were being sold to kids, you know, gaming systems. I mean, we didn't have cable television. I didn't see MTV until I was 19 years old, you know, and so it's just, you know, like having a lot of problems to solve too in this human world. If you put the wrong things to the top and you spend all your energy solving to that, like I have found myself at times neglectful of my relationship with my partner, or neglectful, you know, to myself in my own health. I found myself neglectful to my family's relationship or my home, or my self-care. You know, there's a million things, because I was chasing the trophies, the accolades, and the money. When I finally realized that those would betray me, those things, and that I was putting more into the relationship than they're putting into me, I had a reasoning and a reckoning, which I write about in Win or Learn very, very poignantly in the chapter Call Me Crazy, where I come to the revelation that I finally see the environment I'm sitting in after 32 years in the field, and I realize, like, holy shit, like I got to jump out of this burning building right now, which is what it felt like for me once I was self-aware that everything I put value to was to not a myth, but a mirage, you know, of I had it as, you know, I believed my company loved me the way I loved it. I believed that my job loved me the way I loved it. I believed that my trophies made me powerful. I believed that my money made me, you know, untouchable. And all of that played out to not be true. And so at that point, you know, I had to swim to a different shore. And so the question you asked was, what do you tell people that are, you know, that have the plight of all of these things, what matters? At the end of the day, the whole cliche of like, you're never going to be regretful of having more trophies or money. I've sat with my elders. And so I wish that was a chapter in this book, by the way, and it should have been a chapter in this book. I think I allude to it in places where I give homage to my great aunts who were writers, where I give homage to my great grandmother, who I talk about my relationship. But I made an effort to drive to places that my great aunts and grandparents and great grandparents sat, and I sat with them. And I listened and I talked and I learned about our family and lineage. And I still am. I get in. Last week, I received a photograph of my great grandmother, the clearest black and white photo. And I sat there looking at it. I'm going to do a post about it soon. And I just kept looking at her because I'm like, I'm from her. Like, I came from this woman I don't know that lived generations ago, and it's so intriguing. And so when I finally came to terms with that, I realized, for me, my happiness and self-love were the things that were depleted. And so now I've rearranged all that. I've worked on all of it. I still have money. I still get awards. I get chased for accolades. I get asked to appear on stages. It's great. I still have a lot of remnants of the life I spent 32 years building, and I've taken it all and I've turned it into purpose-filled work where I've given more away than I've taken, and I've helped more people correct their professional course, whether it's saving their company from a business tactical standpoint or psychologically saving them from the depths of depression. I have turned my life into a place where it has great meaning. And so I've changed the currency of my life. And so, see, as we deplete money this year, I'm not falling apart in that regard, because that is not my priority. My priority is helping others. So in some weird way, my cup runneth over this year, because guess what? There's a lot of people that need help.
You think that long-term what's the long-term consequence of that?
So you have a chapter in 30 Days of Thought, don't feed the homeless. And I say, don't bring me stray cats. So I think it means the same thing. I'm very self-aware not to get used. I have to tell you, you taught me this. I don't mind telling you this, because I really easily could like sit there with a piece of bread and 3 people that I love at the table and let 50 more people come and tear our piece of bread apart. And there is respect and honor in protecting what you build and what you have and your own people and your own inner circle, and not letting yourself be devalued. There's a lot of people, I won't name names, that you've warned me off of in the last decade and told me, because it's easy to see from the outside in, that this is a user, that's a taker, this is not a friend, this is whatever. These same people right now are coming to me this year looking for jobs, money, help, interest, all these things. These are people, by the way, that I foolishly thought were my friends, and I couldn't see that they were takers. And so I have to tell you, I have become a stern defense of my time and my places. I just had a woman who had been here working for me left angrily because of some things that I was protecting in terms of being taken advantage of, and literally came back and, more or less this week said that she couldn't feed her family, type of thing. And I don't want to sound cruel at all, but my honest feeling in this regard to this individual is just that I've just repeatedly been taken advantage of by this person. And so I'm able to today say, I'm sorry, I can't, or I won't, and I do feel like I'm stronger in that way. And so I'm not letting stray cats. I have some people that I really care about here that are bringing me more people that are sick and hurt. And, there's a chapter in the book called The Healer that we'll get to, where you called me a healer. You know what you are? You're a healer, after we had done years and years of stuff together. And I sat with that night going, I'm a healer. Wow, I'm a healer. And then I thought, well, yeah, I'm, of course, like, now that makes so much sense. And I am. That's what I want to do for people. I want to heal them. But there is only so much of me to go around. And so that sounds egotistical. I don't like how that sounds, what I just said, but I have to be aware that I can only help so many people. Like, I can't die under the weight of helping others. You get what I'm saying? I can't let it distract me from running this company. I need to run a good business, being a good mom, being a good wife, I'm not a greedy person, but I just have to really beware right now of the ship will sink if too many people swim to our ship and try to crawl on because their ship is sinking somewhere. This is going to be a really interesting year. You're going to see a lot of character tested this year by people. It's sad. It's hard. There will be people that I take on my ship. I know there will be. But I will decide carefully about that. Will the person coming on my ship help the other people on my ship? Will they actually help us save ourselves? Is it additive or is it, disruptive or subtractive, if you will?